the Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm Phil Kirkbride and today joined by Sam Carroll, Adam Jones and Chris Beesley as we chew the fat over all the major talking points, or the major talking point at Goodison Park. And of course, that is the future of manager Marco Silva in the wake of a damaging 2-0 defeat at home to Norwich City at Goodison last Saturday. And we will attempt to unravel and pick through the wreckage of that situation, the manager's situation, and what appears as though, at the minute, a bit of a stay of execution because he will be in charge for the game at Leicester on Sunday. But after that is anyone's guess. Sam, start with you. I think it's probably just kind of interesting to generally kind of ask everybody, what do you make of the whole situation, without going into the specifics yet, and we will do, just generally, how have we got to this point? 18 months on, we're here again.
It is, honestly. It's been weird, I think, especially the last since the Norwich game. Sometimes it's nice to kind of like turn off from the footy, and especially working here as well when you're not in work. But it has constantly just been on my mind in terms of this is definitely the weirdest situation that I've ever known Everton to be in, that we've essentially not been able to sack the manager really just because there's just a total lack of alternatives, because we're going into a run of games that if you did hire a new manager, you could potentially lose all of them. And that's not a defeatist attitude. That is just simply the way we're playing, how good some of these teams are, whether we want to admit it or not, that we're playing. So it is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that the day, I think back to the day we signed Moyes Keane and the optimism and, a decent start to the season, after we beat Watford on the second. Watford was the second game, yeah. The optimism around the team, around the manager, around the performances, around Marcel Brands was just sky high, and now it is just dismal. It's an absolutely dismal time, and I just think Marco has just shot himself in the foot so badly in terms of just beat Norwich, just win that game, and we wouldn't now be here at the moment. And you've really got to look at it now, haven't you, and say that unless it's an absolutely remarkable 90 minutes of football at the King Power this weekend, I just don't think there's any way back. And even if it was a remarkable 90 minutes, has it now became too fractured that might not even save him? I don't know. It's so difficult, and I couldn't even imagine what the mood of Finch Farm must be like at the moment.
Adam, did you imagine that things would, the start of the season, as Sam had mentioned, could you have imagined that we would be at this point by not even December, and talking about a manager being on the brink or being on very thin ice, if you like, and being in such danger?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't think it would be naive to think, at the start of the season, we all looked at that fixture list and we thought, right, up until December, we've got a pretty favourable run, barring, like games against Spurs and Man City.
Yes.
That's a fairly favourable run. If you'd have told me at the start of the season we'd lose to all three promoted teams, all by a score of 2-0, I would have told you to just go away. Like that is absolutely not going to happen. But if it has, and it's more confusing than anything else, because it shouldn't be like this. Everton do have a squad of absolutely quality players. They can put in performances, like the West Ham game just over a month ago. That was one of the best Everton displays we've seen in a long, long time. So to go from that to then go to this Norwich game, it's just it is just baffling for the fans to watch. I'm sure it's probably baffling for Marco Silva to watch as well. And let's not forget, he has been, I'd say, very unlucky in terms of like injuries and stuff this season. But at the same time, I don't think you can pick Cenk Tosun and Gylfi Sigurdsson for a game at the weekend and then come out and say we were too slow. Well, we had quicker players on the bench. Like, if that was the problem, why didn't they start? It's those sorts of things, and it just feels like Groundhog Day with another manager now. The supporters really seem to turn at the end of that Norwich game, and it's as Sam said, even if there is some sort of miraculous performance against Leicester, you struggle to see where the way back is going to come from, because we need a good consistent run of games. We still haven't won back-to-back Premier League games this season, which is absolutely appalling stat. So yeah, there's just a lot for the club to be thinking about over the next coming days and weeks, because it just can't continue like this, because we're coming into this. We say it's a really difficult period of games, but it's a really important period of games as well. Like, we need to be picking up points. We need to go through to the next stage of the cup. Like, this is an absolutely massive couple of weeks now, and everybody at the club needs to find a way to get through it.
Chris is a seasoned Goodison stalwart, if you like.
I think Bill's trying to use kind words to make me say I'm older than him.
Have you ever known or heard? I appreciate you've not been at every game for every season, but have you ever known or heard or seen a situation like we had on Saturday, where a large section of home support, and it was large enough for it to be significant, joining in the away fans' chant of "You're getting sacked in the morning"?
I don't know if there ever has been times like that. There's obviously been many times of upset with the manager. I mean, famously going back all the way to Howard Kendall before my time, when they throw in the cushions from the main stand at Goodison, and obviously Kendall was able to turn that around. But I think that's part of the problem, in that we're almost waiting for that magical moment. I mean, it might sound dramatic, but comparing it to the Japanese and wanting the divine wind to come and save them, this idea of Oxford United and a Kevin Brock back pass, turned it around, and Kendall became the most successful manager in the club's history. I don't see that turning point coming. But in regards to supporter unrest, I think that the fans were much more against Allardyce, but there wasn't that one moment, like you say, of them actually joining in a chant of "You're getting sacked in the morning." And I think that was the pivotal turning point in regards to Marco Silva. When he came in, a lot of question marks. He brought a lot of promise, but what had he actually achieved? But people were willing to give him a chance. They wanted a much more expansive approach after Allardyce, and people just waited to see what would happen. Difficult times in his first season, but managed to turn it around with that strong finish in the springtime. So people were open-minded. They were pleased with the recruitment over the summer, and like we said, went into the season with a great deal of optimism and expected to be pushing on the door for a place in Europe. So yeah, so for it to come to that, it was pretty spectacular, and I think, like as Sam mentioned, it could have all been all right if he'd got that result. We've got such a concertina division at the moment, in that they were just 3 points off Sheffield United, get that home win ahead of these tougher run of fixtures, and everything would have been relatively okay for Marco. But it's almost like, after dodging a few bullets of what were must-win fixtures against West Ham by his own admission, and a few more, the Carabao Cup game, maybe when they were losing to Tottenham, if they'd not got something at Southampton, he'd come from a few tests, but all of a sudden it finds themselves where they are now, and it's almost like the feeling was they'd come to the end of the road.
I think it's as B says there, and it's obviously hard to speak for that, as you said, significant portion of supporters who joined in with that chant. But I think that's the thing, isn't it, that Evertonians, when Silva came in, were so set on, okay, and I think it was inspired by just kind of how miserable having Sam Allardyce as the manager was, but everyone, it was the same message, wasn't it? Let's give them time. And they gave him chances, and I think they probably gave Marco Silva the biggest chance of any Everton manager in a long time in that dismal run we had between, I think, December and February last season, where things, especially after that Millwall game, it was grim, wasn't it? It was really, really, really bad. And to Silva's credit, he came through that, and as Bees has just pointed out there, he's came through a few this season. We need to win this one. This one's big. Don't lose that one, and he delivered every single time. But then again, as Adam says, it was just so difficult. Just everything that could have went wrong on Saturday did go wrong. But then at the same time, for the manager to then come out and say, "Well, we were lacking a bit of pace there." And again, it's difficult. Do you not change your winning team? It would have been difficult for him to say, okay, well, let's start Iwobi, let's start Calvert-Lewin for a team that had beaten Southampton. But I think the reason why things maybe got as heated in the stands as they did is because, one, I don't think fans like being able to sit in the Gladys Street, in the main stand, wherever you sat, and be able to see where things are going wrong themselves. And also then, because they have given the manager so much time, because they have gave him so many opportunities, because they've continued to back the team. You know, when you think about Liverpool coming to Goodison last season, you know, even though it had been a difficult spell, you know, the support they gave there was one of the best Goodison atmospheres in kind of recent times. You know, they've given a lot to the manager, they've given a lot to these players that at times haven't given a lot back. And you know, you talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, and maybe Norwich might have been that, just in terms of people's patience being well and truly broken, really.
I think all three of you have mentioned at various points in your pieces there, Silva turned it round last season. So, again, just playing devil's advocate and for balance, why can't he do it again?
I think this is I don't think there's any reason to say he can't do it again. Like, anything's possible. He could find that magic formula. That formation that really clicks with this team. This, a consistent starting 11 would probably be quite nice. But it's just in much harder circumstances this time around, isn't it? Like when he was doing it last season, we obviously had that sort of 17-day break where it wasn't really an international break, so we had the whole squad just at Finch Farm for 17 days, and he was like, right, drill this into them. This is how we're going to defend set pieces now, because obviously the zonal marking thing was what was killing us back then. So he seemed to sort that out for the time being, and he really seemed to drill in to his ethos to the players over that 17-day break. He's not really got that opportunity this time, and he's got a tougher run of games, like consistently back to back. At least last season when we had that spell, it was all home game, and then we'd travel somewhere else away, but it was like a tough run of home games. This time it's home and away. You're gonna struggle to pick up points in any of these matches. So yeah, it is possible, but he's gonna find it so much tougher. And if it doesn't happen against Leicester, then I can't see how it is gonna happen. So there needs to be some sort of massive wholesale changes for me to the starting lineup or the.
Can he make them though?
And I think
has he got the?
I think that's the problem. The
options to do that.
I think that's the problem he'd say. Like, he hasn't really got the personnel to do it. And I think another thing in his defence, I was mentioning obviously Cenk Tosun and Gylfi Sigurdsson before. He's picked £70 million worth of talent there. I mean, at the end of the day, they should be enough to be able to beat Norwich at home. And I don't think they stepped up not picking them out particularly. I don't think any player stepped up in the way that they really should have. But it is just absolutely baffling. You really find it hard to even think of a way that this group of players can turn things around. Like, fingers crossed they can, and But
yeah, isn't the strange thing though, and this is what has made Saturday so confusing for me, was largely at Southampton. The performance had been pretty positive. Played pretty well, relatively speaking, in patches, and the run, give or take, Brighton, etc. The run from the last international break, the results have been pretty good. Not brilliant, but pretty decent. So how do we go from finishing for the international break with a really positive performance and a first away win in the season at Southampton to turning that in? I don't get it.
I think what impressed me most about that Southampton game as well is when Southampton equalised, we showed a bit of backbone. Like, it wasn't one of them where you thought, oh, Southampton are going to go on and score the winner now. Like, there was maybe a 5-minute spell where Southampton pressurised a little bit more, but then it was Everton straight back on the front foot, and it was Everton who got that winner, and that seemed like a turning point to me at the time. I was thinking, they didn't fall behind, of course, but like this is a Silva team now that's shown a little bit of backbone, and obviously going into this tough run of games, it's probably going to be crucial for that to happen. And there was just no semblance of that at all. Like, as soon as Norwich took the lead, it just didn't look like Everton were ever going to get back into that game, which is, as you've said, it's completely baffling. And I don't know how to solve that. So I'm not really sure how Silva is going to be able to solve it, or to be honest, I don't know how any manager is going to be able to come in and solve that at the minute. Like, there's something just inherently wrong with what's going on at the minute. I'm at a loss to be able to put my finger on exactly what it is.
Chris, no word from the club, no statement, no official message about the manager's situation. All we do know is that he will be in the dugout at Leicester on Sunday. What happens after Sunday?
I'm not. Unfortunately, I don't even know whether the people in charge know this themselves. That seems to be a big part of the issue. I think that on Saturday, after the 2-0 defeat to Norwich City, Marco's body language, the words he used, I think the manager himself thought he was going that night. I know that they met to discuss his future, and I think he feared it. Time was up then, and obviously he said the day off he went back to Lisbon, of course, with Luis Boawarte, and they were back in Finch Farm yesterday. Who knows what's being said? I'm sure there is plenty being said at the top level, and that seems to be the issue, because we've seen at other clubs when a change of manager took place recently with Pochettino. Mourinho was in there straight away. I mean, that wasn't the case at Everton 2 years ago when they got rid of Ronald Koeman, and there was the long period with Unsworth as caretaker before Sam Allardyce eventually came in. And it seems, from my way of looking in from the outside, that may have a similar scenario here, in that I don't think that Farhad Moshiri in essence wants to sack Silva. He's his man. He pushed very hard to get him. Both
spent a lot of money to get him.
The failed attempt, of course, before Allardyce, which caused all the bad blood with Watford, and then obviously subsequently getting him the following summer. So he's his man. I mean, he doesn't want to be seen as sacking his fourth manager in 3.5 years. So I think that's actually helping Silva, in that if it had been different circumstances, he probably would have gone by now. But Mr. Moshiri doesn't want to seem to be pressing the panic button every time. He is going to give him a bit more time because he's his man as well. So I think that it could change on a day-to-day basis, and unfortunately it would seem to me that they don't seem to know, or they don't seem to be able to get whoever they do want, if it is the case that they want to get rid of Silva at this moment.
At what point in Farhad's plan and vision for the football club and in the project, as people say, at what point does he have to give a manager more than 1 and a bit seasons?
That's obviously the plan, isn't it? And that was the plan this season. But I just think that there still has to be a line drawn somewhere. And, I said after the Norwich game that the biggest problem that Silva's got at the moment, and what I do truly feel sorry for him over, is that you just can't sack a squad. Do you know, that these players aren't as good as they think they are for a start, and aren't playing the way they should be playing, and that is killing Silva, and it's killing Silva that, who could have thought that we wouldn't get Zuma and then wouldn't be able to find an adequate replacement? Who would have thought that Jabaman would play 135 minutes and then lose the majority of his first season in English football? Who'd have thought Andre Gomez would suffer a shocking injury in the manner that he did? But the bottom line is that the team isn't playing good enough, and you can't sack all of them. So the manager in this modern world is the one who gets it in the neck. And I just think that for Farhad at the moment, it must just be a total period of soul searching. He's came in, and I kind of get that football is an emotional sport, and when things start going round, people start pointing the finger at everyone, from the players to Marco to Farhad to Brands to the cleaners at Goodison. Everyone at the moment is seemingly getting it, but there is a part of me that feels sorry for Farhad as well, because he's came in and he's pumped all this money not just into the footballing side, but is clearly very invested for building us a new stadium, something that nobody else has ever done for Everton Football Club. He's completely transformed the finances of the club. but he has obviously been totally committed to standing by Silva. But things have now reached a point where it just might not be able to carry on, and I don't think that's particularly Mashiri's fault, and for the reasons that I've said there, I don't think it is totally Silva's fault either. It has just been one of those times where everything that could have possibly gone wrong kind of has. And I think maybe now when you look back, I know with hindsight it's always kind of, you have 20/20 vision, but kind of what we were speaking about the other week, feeling that maybe they did act a little bit too soon on Koeman, and then that kind of shone through in the fact that we didn't appoint a new manager until more than a month later. It was a little bit embarrassing, the whole Allardyce thing, that we kind of went back and he got an 18-month deal and we had to pay him so much money to get rid of him in the end. But right now it is just a total period of soul searching for Mashiri, because it's like, most Premier League teams at the moment probably would sack Silva. There isn't an adequate replacement. The fixtures are probably going to leave us in the relegation zone if we don't kind of pull our fingers out. So there's so many factors to consider, and obviously, as you're saying, not to go full Kev Keegan on it, but I would love it if we beat Leicester and we could kind of come through this period, and that we could, because Mashiri, Brands and Silva do have a plan, and I do think that the signings in the summer suggested that they were signing players to play in a certain way, to maybe start bringing in that 4-3-3, to kind of maybe phase out some of the players that didn't fit that method. But at the same time, it's a results business, and we haven't got those results. So I just think it is an absolutely massive decision that Mashiri's going to have to make in this next month. But I would be massively surprised if Silva did get more than the 18 months that he's on.
Adam, let's try and work through the permutations then. What happens if we go and get a result at Leicester on Sunday? What happens to Marco?
Well, he'd have to stay, I think. I think it would be pretty unfair to sack him after getting what will be a really good result against a team that are flying high at the minute. He'd have to have the chance to see it through to the derby at least. I think it'd be tough to bring in, regardless of situation, I think it'd be tough to bring in a new manager just before the derby anyway. Maybe you might get a bit of a new manager boost, perhaps, if you're going to Anfield. But, at the end of the day, we're going to Anfield. A lot of teams will go to Anfield and lose this season. And, we all know Everton's record at Anfield anyway. So it's going to be it's going to be really tough for us to try and pick up a result there. So it'd be hard to put in a new manager for that game. And then you're thinking, Chelsea at home, that's also going to be a really difficult game. I suppose
people will probably scream at the car radio or at their phone if they're listening through that. When I say, well, what happens if we get some sort of result Sunday, do well in the derby, and then come out of this run, which we all accept is very difficult, through into the next round of the Cup, having picked up a decent amount of points from these games. And we get to Christmas, and actually, you go, I haven't done too badly out of this. What happens to Silva then? And this is kind of what the issue for me is. Nobody knows, and this whole uncertainty is what's killing everything. Because what happens in that theory if actually Marco gets a response out of the players and we do all right?
I think it's a tricky one, because I think he'd need to do exceptionally well to make fans forget about what happened in this match, because we've had it so many times this season. It's just been consistently inconsistent. We've at that point, after the West Ham game, you think, oh, this is it, this is a turning point, and then you get beat by Brighton, obviously in unfortunate circumstances, but still getting beat by Brighton. And then you think back to this one, just beating Southampton, showed a bit of backbone. This is great. Norwich at home, great chance to get a back-to-back win. Threw that away. Didn't we have the chance to go top of the league against Aston Villa?
Yes, yeah.
Missed that opportunity as well. So, all that has piled up now. The reaction after the Norwich game wasn't just because of the Norwich game. It's built up, pent up frustration, and I'd argue probably some of that has been left over from that bad run last season. Yeah. Because I think while we did finish the season pretty well, there was still the odd weird result thrown in there, like getting beat by Fulham away from home. And, I think supporters don't forget those bad runs. So it would take something monumental for the Silva and the players to be able to turn this round to an extent where the fans will go, yeah, let's just forget about this this bad run of form, because even if we get to the end of the season and let's say we were 3 or 4 points off where a position where we wanted to be, you'd go, oh well, if we'd have beat Norwich rather than get beat by them. And so
is that again, just hypothetically for argument's sake, getting to the end of the season or getting to the point at the end of the season where we know if we're going to finish 7th as a target, or we know how we've done in the cups, is that not the time to then make a decision?
You could argue, yeah. You could argue that is certainly the case, and I think the end of the season's when you want to be doing these kind of big decisions anyway. It's a chance to be able to take stock over what's happened before. It'll give a new manager, ample amount of time to prepare for, his first game in charge, etc. But you've got to weigh that up with the fact that if it gets to the point where it's just getting more and more stale and sour under the current regime.
All that granted, yeah.
And I think that's what happened with Martinez, really. I think under Roberto Martinez, I think his sacking was delayed a little bit too long, and especially the atmosphere at Goodison was allowed to get far too sour. We had that protest after the Bournemouth game, was it? Saying you can't really be allowing that to happen at Goodison. I'm not saying that's going to happen this time, but that kind of sour atmosphere is going to happen if these kind of results keep on going. So you've got to weigh that up with the fact that getting our new manager in, you might get the new manager bounce. It's almost like a clean slate in the middle of the season.
Not a guarantee though.
It's not a guarantee, absolutely not. But it's a chance to start fresh, and it's a chance that Silva will struggle to get for himself.
Do you think Silva's situation and sort of fractured relationship with the supporters, I'm not saying it would be solved by any stretch of the imagination, but would it be helped, in inverted commas, if the club made it clear, right, we're still backing him, we're carrying on? And people, and a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, but then everybody would know where they stand.
Yeah, maybe. I always look at stuff like that as like the dreaded vote of confidence. Like but
the frustrating thing for me is that there's nobody saying anything.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that from the reactions of Everton fans that I've spoken to. It's a general lack of communication, really, over this sort of situation I'd say at best confusing fans, if not making them angry. So yeah, I think that might help. I'd almost say it puts undue pressure on Silva, but I think he's under the most amount of pressure that he's going to be under anyway. Well, so
absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I think you might as well. I'm not sure I'd go as far as say, right, he's got this amount of games to turn it around. But if they came out and said, look, for the time being, at least, like we are behind the manager.
Except results aren't good enough. Everybody knows.
Yeah. I think I'd argue that potentially goes out.
It's fear, isn't it? The problem is that for me it stinks of a fear from the higher ups at the club to come out and say something, and then for us to get spanked 5-0 by Leicester and then have to renegade on that, And
yeah, but wouldn't it hypothetically say the club said we're supporting Marco, we know the results haven't been good enough, but we're cracking on, and then we go and get beat, like get an absolute hiding at Leicester. I don't think anybody would come back at them if they decide actually no. Sorry, that's not good enough.
Maybe, and to be honest, it is just totally up in the air, isn't it? And I think kind of what you two have just spoken about there, and I think Adam summed up quite well. But just that whatever happens here, if we go with kind of that side of saying, yeah, we do come out of this run all right, we beat Leicester. Imagine if we got something at Liverpool and then we beat Chelsea. Even if we did come out into the new year, mid-table, lower mid-table, whatever, Marco Silva is under pressure till the end of the season, and his job would be reviewed at the end of the season anyway because of this. So either way, it's just one of them, and I just think at the moment it is just so annoying and so frustrating that we shouldn't be having this conversation. I don't personally think Everton would have sacked Silva or reviewed his position, even if we'd have finished in the bottom half of the table in terms of like 10th to 12th, 13th, because they were so committed to
Last
building.
season, you mean? Or?
No, this season again. I think if we'd have maybe finished mid-table this season, there wouldn't have been a point where it would have got to this. It is just that we are now flirting with relegation. We are now in a position where I think if you ask the majority of Everton fans, we probably expect to be in the relegation zone at the start of the new year because of the way the fixtures have panned out and because of how inconsistent we've been throughout the season. So it's just as bad as it can get, and once it gets to that stage, a change of manager is always what comes in, isn't it? So it is just so difficult because a lot does ride on this Leicester game. There is still this strange little kind of 90 minutes of limbo for Silva, where I know it's a totally different squad with a new manager for them, but if we do what we did last season and we pull off a result, then people are going to say, all right then, well, let's see what happens at Anfield, and then we go again, and then you'd be going into a massive home game with Chelsea. So, you know, Everton have kind of done that, haven't they? Without saying it, they've stood by Silva, and he's going to be in the dugout, and it's the biggest 90 minutes of his career to date. But we've said that with Silva a few times. He's managed to dig himself out a few times, but this is a whole different kettle of fish now, and it will be so interesting to see what kind of team he picks, how we get on, how we play, to see whether the players are still kind of playing for him. You know, you think back to that Arsenal game for Koeman. You know, ironically, I think back to that Leicester game under Martinez. I know it was Sunderland that finished them off, but I think the Leicester one was the one. I know they just won the league, but you looked at that game, didn't you? You said, that's it now. It is done. They're not playing for him. It's the idea.
That's another element. Sorry to interrupt. That was sort of chucked up in the air again after Saturday. Oh, he's lost the dressing room. But how can he go from having rallied them for the previous 4 or 5 games before the international break and decent results? You can't have lost them in the day and a half he had them back at Finch Farm.
Well, weirdly with Silva, that's been the difference for me between Koeman and Martinez. Yeah, and I've missed out Allardyce there, but I think any player worth the salt knew he weren't staying past the end of that season. I don't particularly think he has, and I know it would be silly to kind of believe that everything the player said is always 100% true, but you know, from the way the players speak about him, I think it's Mina that calls him the professor, and from what we've seen, as you said, at Southampton, I don't think he has lost the dressing room. And again, that's what goes back to, you know, I think Michael Ball said it in his column, and what I kind of learned from before. These players just aren't as good as they think they are, and what maybe other people have built them up to be. And that's what I think there's 3, 4, 5 players in that Everton team against Norwich who if we didn't have the injuries we had, or if we'd maybe have recruited a little bit better, wouldn't be anywhere near this starting 11, because they're not good enough. So that is the thing. I definitely don't think he's lost the dressing room. I just think it's been a perfect storm of recruitment issues, of injuries, of as Adam says, being consistently inconsistent. And obviously that's going to fall at the door of Silva, that has just led us down this kind of horrible avenue once again of change of managers. You know, Everton fans my age and Adam's age, you know, for a long time knew us as a club that stood by his manager, and as a club that had a manager for 11 years. You know, it felt alien when Martinez first took over, but now, as you said, we don't know having a manager for more than 18 months and this kind of revolving door, and ultimately for me it's dissipating. It's disappointing.
It is dissipating.
Yeah. It's disappointing, and you know, it's a little bit heartbreaking as well to just go through it again and to see, you know, your Leicester City doing so well, and you know, even when you rewind 10 years to see the position Liverpool found themselves in, and to see where they are now, it is just, you know, and even Spurs have done it recently. You know, we were miles ahead of them. We were finishing above Spurs every season. We finished above Liverpool 2 seasons running. Leicester were in the Championship or League One or somewhere, and now to see where we are, and to see where we are this season after again people's hopes getting up, it's just so frustrating.
Chris, obviously there's been the whole gamut of names thrown up and suggested as potential replacements should Silva be sacked. Obviously, the one that probably carries far more weight than any of the others is David Moyes. It feels to me like there isn't really an appetite from the fans to see David come back. What's your thoughts on that as a potential?
Yeah, that's certainly what I've picked up on. I mean, since the weekend, I've been in all week and various things have been said, and he's been mooted as one of the front runners if there were to be a change, and there doesn't seem to be an appetite for that at all. Not that people are ungrateful at all for what he did, as we said, very much an anomaly, as although it's what Sam and Adam might have grown up with, but obviously managers don't tend to stay that long at any club. So 11 years at Everton, he obviously got a lot more right than he got wrong. Ultimately, though, fell short first time round. I mean, he might think, well, I've got the extra funds now. I'll do what I couldn't do first time round. But we've got to look at a couple of things here about where David is in his career at the moment. I think he would struggle to get a job at any other Premier League club at the moment. So it's just on the fact that it's either sentiment or he knows the club. You just look at that time period as well. 17 and a half years ago he came to the club. That's a longer period of time between Kendall's first appointment and Kendall coming back third time around.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was 16 years. So football's changed a lot in that period. I'm not saying at all that David Moyes is a dinosaur or yesterday's man, but I don't think they'd be getting anywhere else in the Premier League now. So I think that's what many of the fans are talking about now when they think about the prospect of Moyes coming back. Just seen as a retrograde step. They're not even anti-David Moyes. A lot of them are very appreciative for the great job that he did there. But given that all the money that, like we said, that Mr. Moshiri has pumped into the club and greater ambitions and trying to look forward. So after 3.5 years of all the manager comings and goings and all the millions spent on the team, if you're all of a sudden let's go back to the guy that left 6.5 years ago and hasn't lasted a year in the job in any of his positions since then, whether it's Manchester United, Real Sociedad, Sunderland, West Ham. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't seem to fit right with many of the Evertonians, and I think that's a big part of this great hesitancy for them to go down that route if they were to get rid of Marco. So it does seem to be that would be a very unpopular choice, not because of David per se, but because of what it would represent, that move.
Adam, any take on that particular issue?
I think I've got to agree with Bees, really. I think, you can't ignore what he did at Everton, but in a similar vein, you can't really ignore what's happened since he left Everton. He had the funds at Manchester United and it didn't work out for him there. He tried his hand in Spain, didn't work out for him. He's been back in the Premier League twice, didn't really work out for him. I'd argue he probably actually did all right at West Ham, but
yeah,
it did still wasn't enough to get him the job. And I think what Bees has quite rightly said there, like he wouldn't be getting another Premier League job. Like, it is just Everton, and it seems like there's some sort of perception like he would be some sort of safe option for Everton, like as if like he'd come in and instantly like he'd get the club and everything would be all right again. And I just don't think that's a guarantee whatsoever. I don't think he's got any more guarantee than any other manager that's going to come into the club. And I think Everton really should be looking at better options than David Moyes at the minute, because as Bees has quite rightly said, he wouldn't be getting a job anywhere else. So why should he instantly walk into a club which is, got European ambitions, really? So, Moyes just doesn't really seem to fit that ideal.
Okay, we will reconvene around the pod table again on Friday, post Marco Silva's press conference. But just before we wrap up today's, some of you are betting men, some of you are not around this table. I'll ask each of every one of you. When we get to Christmas, and you're opening your presents, Sam, and just tucking into your turkey, who will be in charge of Everton Football Club?
Too busy thinking about the turkey.
Okay, well, all right then. I'll simplify. Will Marco still be there?
No. Just
okay. Adam?
I find it hard to. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I don't think he will be.
You?
Just to be different, yes. I don't know. Who knows? Honestly, who knows? Anybody listening to this who's got the answers, send them in, because nobody knows.
Yep.
Send them to the club, nobody knows. It's a crazy time, isn't it? Thank you very much for listening, chaps. Thank you for your company. You have been listening to the Royal Blue Podcast.
The Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.